सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। We continue with yesterday, and the second part of the question, or the second question, to elaborate on Brahmacharya. Before I do that, I want to bring in the reminder from where this question has come. Both the questions that we took yesterday and today. I had mentioned for Vairagyam a kind of a technique that helps, which is prescribed in tradition, which is an intellectual exercise otherwise, which is a constant reminder of seeing things as they are in an effort to remove our superimpositions of pleasures upon objects and beings as them seen as sources of pleasure. And for that constant reminder, we said the technique advised was Pratipaksha Bhavana. And from there, I went on to say, being very careful so that we as students of Vedanta understand where does Pratipaksha Bhavana fall into, means what is the context of it, or what is the subject that talks about Pratipaksha Bhavana. And I take a lot of personal care to ensure that we, as those who teach this or propagate this knowledge, try and put in that effort to keep to the student's mind what really is Vedanta. I'm repeating myself. What is truly Vedanta is just knowledge-based. And knowledge is not like any worldly knowledge. That knowledge is of one's own being, that we are already claiming as मैं हूँ, I am, I. To be able to get educated and re-educated upon replacing your sense of identity with the help of knowledge, which is not a sensory verifiable knowledge, is definitely very subtle, and it requires a certain inner preparedness. That inner preparedness the Shastras have constantly reminded people when the topic of Vedanta starts. I'm again repeating, Vedanta is purely knowledge-based. That you who call yourself as a living being, as I, who claim yourself as this body, and these thoughts and these feelings and these hopes and everything that you are a bundle of, you call yourself as a living entity with certainty of your existence. This is the very topic of Vedanta. And to re-educate ourselves on what is the correct placement of our identity, is definitely a very subtle process which is to deal with removal of what we think we are, which is a lot of preparedness. Because the same place where I think I am the individual is the same place which has to also work upon its preparedness to accept the Vedantic knowledge. Vedantic knowledge, in a nutshell, is only to say that you are Brahman, you are complete, you are full, you are birthless, you are deathless, you are changeless, all those things, which by the end of Tattvabodha you will start gaining more clarity on. But we are on the topic of preparation, because the same mind, the thinking process, this one who thinks he is who he is, what I am, is the one who has to reassess himself, herself, and start recognizing that you are genderless, you are ageless, you are bodiless, your existence is free of everything. It is an extremely subtle in the sense of बहुत बारीक विचार है ये, बहुत बारीक है, बहुत सूक्ष्म है ये विचार, for which there is a lot of preparation. And in that preparation, we started by Viveka, Vairagya, which means this, all Vedanta texts would start from there. If you are in Upanishads, they presume you already have this because you have to come to the topic straight in Vedanta. I took in that care to bring in the point of saying Pratipaksha Bhavana, when Vedanta and the teachers would use this technique to educate people, this technique is not really an integral part of Vedanta study. वेदांत की साधना तो सिर्फ श्रवण मननम निधिध्यासन है, which you will again, if I've already not covered, hearing, reflecting and correcting. Hear, know the right knowledge, listen to the right knowledge, reflect on the right knowledge and correct your wrong thinking. This alone is Vedantic practices. But for this listening to be objective, for listening to be held within oneself or one's nature, I'm saying there's a, Shastra says, there is a whole lot of inner preparation of the mind because it's the same place where the knowledge has to take place. And so the Shastra Vedanta also accommodates the topic of self-preparation. Adhikaratvam we say. That self-preparation is this, what we are doing, Viveka and Vairagya. Therefore, for one who wants to prepare himself, herself, and Vairagya is the topic, one of the techniques that the Shastra allows us to follow is Pratipaksha Bhavana. And to take care that Pratipaksha Bhavana is not a part of Vedantic study because you're attending Vedanta class. Most of the people go away with this thought that Pratipaksha Bhavana is Vedanta. And therefore, we get involved in these practices and exercises, and then we somehow miss the main point, and the main point still has to arrive, which is Brahma Gyan, which is Atma Gyan. So, to mention and be very clear and specific on it, Pratipaksha Bhavana comes from Yoga school. And for Yoga school, there is a text, Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Patanjali Yoga Sutra is entirely the Ashtanga Yoga, which I brought in which their preparation and their disciplines and those sadhanas, which is Yama and Niyama, Asana, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, Pranayam in between. So, in Yama and Niyama, I mentioned that Yama are these non-killing, truthfulness, non-stealing, continence and non-receiving. Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha. This is what was Yamas. And then we said Niyamas is Shaucha, Santosha, Tapas, Swadhyaya, Ishvara, Pranidhan. And from this context came these two questions. What is tapas and what is brahmacharya? So therefore, to understand what is tapas, One is from the yoga point of view, and one is how in Vedanta we understand tapas in a general way. Therefore, any form of tapas becomes tapas. Means any form means at any level, as we did yesterday. For your preparation, you can choose any form of a practice, which is, in today's terms, it's called religious practice. I always refrain from the word religious because in Vedanta there is nothing like religion. And in our context of Vedic life, religion is a very recent term. Vedic view of life is how you conduct your life. With what models of pursuits do you engage with that you can do your own shreyas, you can come to your own benefits, higher benefits, the spiritual benefits, means your higher nature. So Vedanta brings in a few points from other schools of thoughts which highly emphasize only on preparation as their main objective of the school. I'm repeating myself. Vedanta brings in, allows. Vedanta is purely Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasam. There is nothing other than Brahma Gyan which is called Vedanta. There is no other practice, no other sadhana required for a student of Vedanta. Be very clear on this point. But when we start listening to Vedanta, we are not fully prepared for acknowledging that knowledge. For whatever reason, today's communications have increased, today's accessibility of knowledge has increased. For a lot of reasons, a knowledge can come to us before our genuine vairagyam has happened to us, before our jignasa for our self-knowledge has come to us. Knowledge can come to us before, through whatever measures, by our own past anugraha, we could have heard some knowledge, but we are still not in a ready state to accept the Brahmagyan, for which Vedanta allows it. It's not contradictory. It allows certain techniques or certain measures that other schools of thought take as primary to their school. I'll give an analogy. Very recently it occurred to me. When today's world, when we go, we have all specializations and super specializations in medicine. When you go for a symptom, say in modern times, say now in present times, breathlessness is your symptom. And you go to get yourself checked up for breathlessness. But natural breathlessness, the first thing you will go to is some pulmonologist, somebody who takes care of your lungs. Because breathless means, let me check out the lung. And when he is examining your lung, he finds that the problem is not really with the lung, but it is actually with your heart. So he refers, he calls in. You're still his patient, but he calls in the referral of a cardiologist. Then cardiologist realizes that you need surgery. Cardiologist calls in a cardiothoracic surgeon. Now they are all working on what? On your one symptom. And your one symptom was breathlessness. This breathlessness, you approached a symptom to someone you think has knowledge of eradicating that symptom. But at some point you realized the other doctor needed to be brought in. Other school of knowledge had to be brought in, more specific to addressing the issue. And sure enough, then all of them get their goals met. What are all the goals met? Your breathlessness goes if it has been identified properly. Same way, this is an analogy, example. In the same way, human being experiences throughout his life, all living beings do, but all living beings don't have that choice. Only human being has that choice, that while I'm living my life, I feel a sense of constant want of something or the other. There is this sense of unending want. It expresses in different shapes and varieties throughout my life, but it never seems to have disappeared. And the pursuit of wanting to fulfill some want or the other, which just keeps manifesting because it is a constant there. It is rare that it is so constant, but anybody has even identified it as a constant. Most of us just take this also as a part of our life. But for those who want to examine this, why am I always in a mode of wanting something? Why is it, because for the simple reason that the sense of want brings in along with it a sense of disturbance. I don't feel peaceful. I don't feel happy. I feel something is missing. I may not be very unhappy. Don't worry. But I feel the sense of missing out. I, I feel some sort of a कुछ खालीपन, कुछ emptiness, कुछ vacuum, कुछ lacuna, कुछ कमी, कुछ और, a little more, कुछ चलता रहता है सबके अंदर. This is the symptom. Vedanta actually here is the cardiothoracic surgeon. You go to some immediate recourse for it. Say once you have tried all measures of material world, maybe I want this, maybe I want more money, maybe I want more status, maybe I want a better position in life, maybe I want a better job, maybe I want children, maybe I want grandchildren, maybe if my child gets education, maybe if my child is happy, maybe, you go on seeing that the wants are multiplying, and you just chase some wants thinking, maybe if this want gets fulfilled and I will then be a settled person, I'll then be a peaceful person, I'll then just be myself. And all of us are looking for being myself. Who's the right company for you? Who's the right friend for you? Who's the right person whose association is right for you? Where you can just be yourself. That means our true urge within is to just be myself. But my knowledge of myself doesn't seem to find a limit, doesn't seem to get defined. Which is that myself that will give me no more search. So I go with this symptom of I want something, and I first immediately direct it to whatever my senses take me to, and bring in yesterday's class, that Ratha example, that the senses take me towards sense objects, and that sense object is the marg, जिस पे इंद्रिय चलती है. But natural, my first recourse, every human being's first recourse is going to be to follow the material world. Means the world which the senses move towards. And as we saw yesterday, senses are incapable of moving inward. So you do not ever come to the conclusion that means, in other words, you just stay in this pursuit. 99% of people would prefer to stay in this pursuit because this seems to be known, and some sensory pleasure is some pleasure, and some pleasure is better than no pleasure. So you just go on postponing the hope into something else and something else with an idea that kabhi wo mil jayegi, kabhi wo ho jayega, kabhi wo, so that hope keeps the person survived. This is the symptom. You try the material world first. You try every pursuit and chase here. That 1% of people who somewhere begin to suspect, I'm saying 1% is just arbitrary, it could be 10%, doesn't matter. It's not important because there's no statistics for it. That some people are there who see the future of these pursuits much beforehand by observing things and people around them, those who got it. When you identify the same, so say, I want wealth and I think wealth is going to make me happy, then at a very correct age in your life, you see rich people and you say, oh, hold on. Rich people are not necessarily happy. This is an assumption that richness will make me happy because the richness hasn't made the other person happy. That means there must be something else. And you go on doing this in your thinking while you are still engaged in life and wanting to pursue whatever because you're wanting to fulfill yourself. You go on doing, but there will be some people who fast forward their pursuits and the ends. When they watch the end of their pursuit in time, उसके साथ लग के क्या मिल रहा है, you develop vairagyam from it, because जो चीज तुम्हें चाहिए वो वहां है नहीं. And you recognize the futileness of this pursuit. You just recognize that it will be meaningless, because it will give me something. If I'm happy with that something and I'm happy to be in the chase, there is no problem. Perfect, continue. But there will be from that small person who will say, wait, my life can be more worthy. I can probably think there must be some other thing. That vairagyam is what was initiated by a correct thinking in a person. And once you approached through this, artha means, this is called artha, material pursuits and everything that comes within it is called artha. You come to the other means. It's like going to the pulmonologist, and then the pulmonologist, you suddenly realize this doesn't help my search. So you bring in another school of thought. And whatever is immediate. So in today's world, you may have many varieties of spiritual heads and institutions, and you say, okay, maybe let me do japa of Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare, or let me just do service, or let me just go. There are many forms of, this is where the person begins to get initiated into those religious disciplines. When your interest from the physical gains, material gains, has diminished, it will never be abolished. It will be diminished enough for you to introduce some other pursuit. And the religious pursuit begins. Now you realize for a few years can go by, maybe a whole life can go by, maybe many lifetimes can go by, but there'll be a very small percentage from there also who will now suddenly realize this also doesn't add to it. This also does not bring me to my fullness. This does not, my fullness I may still not be aware of. I only know that my sense of want is not disappearing in spite of coming to religious disciplines and becoming the most sincere religious devotee possible. I have followed all the disciplines of that school. But somewhere you realize, ये भी वो चीज हो नहीं सकती है, क्योंकि my sense of want may have got better, but it doesn't seem to address it fully. I'm not as I was in the material chase world. I am better off, certainly. Many people may settle down there. As I said, for many janmas also you can settle down there. But there'll still be a few more people from there, who will suspect immediately. They'll develop vairagyam from those activities also. Which means I can do them. I have correct value for them. I know what they give me. But what I would really want is, where does my symptom end? And my symptom is my sense of lingering want, which seems to not ever leave me. It's like my shadow. जाती ही नहीं. कभी ऐसा वक्त आता ही नहीं है, कभी ऐसा experience हुआ ही नहीं है that I am not a wanting person. And if anybody has come this far in recognition of their own self in an objective way, without all that self-condemnation, all those things do not qualify you for the study. When anyone has come this far in themselves to say, I'm fine as a person and I'm better off than most of the people, but yet there is something that seems to be keeping me in the search of fulfilling something. And there you are now bringing in the point where you say the only thing left is, because you've covered the entire range of religious practices, what you can do with your body, you've done all the tapas with the body, what you can do with the speech, you've done a lot of japa, you've done a parayanam, you've done parikramas, you've done fasting, you've done every service you've done from physical world, from emotional solace, giving counseling to people, helping. You've done everything possible that is really possible in the world, in the name of what? Finding that fullness of your own being. But it did not end there. Now came the real quest, where you say, none of the realm of action seems to be fulfilling me, because all that you were doing in terms of religious practices was also actions. Whether they were from the body or speech or your mind, but all of them were still actions. And then by some pure anugraha that one has earned through all those practices, spiritual disciplines one took in one's life, or by sheer grace of some punya, whatever terms, it doesn't matter. But when you come to Vedanta and you realize the first time you're beginning to hear that which is going to put an end to the symptom, and the symptom is that breathlessness that I was experiencing was a constant sense of want, which will only go away when I know who I am in my essential being. Means I need to now begin to discern this thought that I think I am. How am I not that? That process, which begins with Shravanam, is not necessarily that it ends in 1 class, 2 class, 5 classes, 5 years, 50 years. The correct thinking, the correct listening, a very specific kind of correct listening, which then I reflect upon when my mind has gone through its purification processes. All the religious disciplines that I did were not waste. They had purified me and they were mandatory. So you realize that how beautifully the Vedas have put a person in their pursuit of their own fullness. This, when you come to one of them, by the time you come to Vedanta, you may not fully be a purified person, means you're fully still half here and half there, of 30 here and 70 something. Each one of us has our own proportions. That little hang that we have, that vairagyam that is still not full, and that rag that I still have for the world, that's where the yamas and the niyamas, a lot of Vedanta teachers will say it is best to remain with some spiritual disciplines for some time. And in those disciplines, we said Pratipaksha Bhavana was one of them. And here came the second question: what is Brahmacharya? So for Brahmacharyam to understand, you have to understand all this. And what my point here, once again, I am making it very articulate. For a Vedanta student, you need to be very clear. Your Vedanta sadhana only is Shravanam, Manam, Nididhyasanam. But for its preparation, any of the other schools are brought in by Vedanta. So we are bringing in the yoga school, but that does not make it a part of Vedanta. Just because you attend Vedanta class and also you are listening Vedanta, therefore, unless a teacher specifies the source of it, you can be very closely not knowing that you are actually following the yoga school, which is allowed, which is sanctioned, but at some point it will only end at purification. And that is its purpose. So when you understand that these two are together, purpose of these yamas, niyamas are for my purification, for my mental cleanliness, for my mental shuddhi, these end there. There's another way in which Vedanta brings in those practices. If you don't do yama niyamas, you do karam yoga. More closer to Vedanta is because Vedanta is a part of Veda, and we said in the very first class, remember, Karam Kand and Jnana Kand. Karam Kand itself is what has got converted into Karam Yoga thanks to Krishna in the Gita. Karam Yoga is also mental preparation where these yamas and niyamas become a part of it. They don't need to be directly practiced. So Gita has its own, same things are integrated, which means we are addressing the same thing, but we bring it from a different point of view, and that point of view is sanctioned, but with recognition. Now Brahmacharyam, what is Brahmacharyam? So if you're clear this far, we are just entering a little elaboration further into Brahmacharya. Yesterday we did on tapas. Tapas was kept in the context of Gita. Brahmacharyam is clearly, though Krishna mentions it in the Gita, as I said yesterday, Brahmacharyam is a more primary spiritual value from yoga school and has been advocated more into from other religions like Buddhism and Jainism emphasize a lot on it. Vedanta, Brahmacharyam, I'll first do the simpler part. For Vedantic student in Vedanta who has purely come only to Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasan, Brahmacharyam purely means combination of two words, Brahma and Charanam. Brahmacharya means chara means chalna, engaging yourself, keeping yourself engaged. In what? In those things that promote your Brahman, means Brahmagyan. Brahmacharya means keeping yourself in those disciplines, living, abiding with those values which promote the Gyan, Brahmagyan, knowledge of Brahman, your own nature, which encourage you towards your own nature. Whatever you do, which means you can take up any practice from anywhere, as long as you understand it is a practice meant only for quietening of your mind to help you find that relative freedom, develop the right values, develop the right qualities. Once you understand this, you are already a brahmachari. This brahmachari means acharan hai. We often say this word charya is very beautiful. Acharya. Who's an acharya? Acharya. Acharya is one who is a teacher. A teacher is one who is, in our specific context, also abiding by what he teaches. That's an acharya. Acharan means तुम्हारा कंडक्ट ऐसा है, आपका आचरण ऐसा है, जैसा आप समझ रहे हो वैसा आपका आचरण भी है. So that means my acharan is in line with what has come through my study, and my study taught me I am Brahman. That means my entire acharan is in line with this knowledge. That is brahmacharyam from the simple sense. But as time passed, people started, what became more popular in the world is because Vedanta in the real sense of true Vedanta is not very popular. Even if you think Vedanta is very popular, it has still got a lot of interpolations and misunderstandings and different views, and everything goes in the name of Vedanta because everything is handling the same symptom, which is your breathlessness. So everything seems to be passing through the name. But truly it would mean when someone takes it from another point of view, what became popular in the society is when brahmacharya got associated with only celibacy, abstinence of only one kind of a sense activity, and sense activity for pleasure. Brahmacharyam became associated only with restraint of a sense activity, especially of the sense pleasure of one sense activity. Whereas what did I just say a little while ago? Brahmacharya in its real sense means all your acharan from all senses have to be in line with what you are recognizing or what the study is telling you who you are, so that in time you start discovering it. So it will not be ki tumne aaj suna tattvamasi and you will suddenly become awakened beings and enlightened beings and liberated beings, and you will walk like, fly in the air and say, oh, I have nothing that affects me because I'm birthless and I'm deathless. It's not going to happen like that. So while you are listening, you are still listening as an individual. You still need a lot of work on yourself. Brahmacharya meant, doesn't matter whichever practices you take, whether you do fasting, you do maunam, you do parikrama, you do any of the religious activities, you just do human service, you don't do any of these religious activities, but something that is helping you stay connected to the knowledge which you want to own up. That is real brahmacharya. But in time, brahmacharya got associated with only celibacy. And they said celibacy is necessary for moksha. And I'm not misplacing the words. In the yoga school, many of the yogic people, they associate celibacy alone as one of the very primary foundations for moksha. That is why I said it is very essential to draw the line. While Vedanta will only say brahmacharya means all your senses, your acharan should be in line with what you are learning, whatever be your capacity, even little is no problem, because nothing here is wasted in terms of your pursuit. And it is understandable that it is not something that you are going to just grow into one day, immediately, the minute you hear. But I know that since these are online classes and there are many people who would be listening, and most of the times people come with this understanding that dunya mein jo brahmacharya suna hai, that is only associated with celibacy. So I want to get a little into clarification of this term, that Vedanta is not meaning this kind of brahmacharyam itself. When Krishna says it in the Gita, brahmacharyam, satyam, yajna, dana, tapas, he used the word. And then he had said in another verse, brahmacharyam being another value to be abided by, it generally means all sensory practices, all sensory controls. When it has got expanded in the society as celibacy, is actually the yogic school of thought. The yogis believe it. The yogis have this, which Vedanta doesn't accept. Vedanta accepts the practice of brahmacharyam in terms of, yes, since all pleasures need to be controlled and moderated, not denied, moderated. Moderated enough that they do not overturn your mind into its seekingness. But in moderation, as long as those pleasures are not binding you, as long as those pleasures are not capsuling you, as long as they do not upturn your viveka buddhi, up to that point only. If they're upturning it, you have to go into the practices. You have to start certain disciplines for yourself. Therefore, the yogic schools clearly are. We are not saying it's wrong. As I'm saying you must understand in the context in which they say. Why do they say that? They say that because now I'll take you one step behind. They say this brahmacharyam is necessary for moksha because their support comes from Ayurveda. In Ayurveda, I'll try and share another. In Ayurveda, you will see that this is a downloaded copy, so it doesn't seem to have strong fonts, but I am hoping that you'll see it. It is, the book is Ashtang Hridayam, the basic of Ayurveda. I will magnify it as much as one can see. I think now you can see. Yeah. From Ayurvedic standpoint, human body is made up of Sapta Dhatu, 7 dhatus. From Ayurvedic standpoint, Ayurveda, Veda, it is an Upaveda, a Veda which a Vedanga. You see it as 7. The body is seen to be divided in 7 or has 7, made up of, constituted of 7 dhatus is the right word. which is in today's biology called tissues. So what is the 7 tissues? Means 7 tissues that make the body. Rasa dhatu, which is plasma. Rakta dhatu, which is blood. Mamsa dhatu, which is muscle. These are all muscle tissue, blood called as, we all know this. Medo dhatu, the fatty tissue. Asti dhatu, asti is the bones. Maja dhatu, majja dhatu, bone marrow. And shukra dhatu is the reproductive element. The fluid, reproductive fluid. These are the 7 tissues which make the body. The important thing here is that each of them, how is the rasa dhatu made? Ayurveda says rasa dhatu is made with Rasa dhatu is made with food and water that gets ingested. Food and water are the primary building block for your rasa dhatu. Each dhatu has 3 parts. The first part helps construction of its own tissue. The first part means when you take food and water, one of its parts helps convert it into its own dhatu. That food and water will make rasa, and one part of it will help to continue propagating rasa. The second part of the same dhatu will go on to help to make the next dhatu, the succeeding dhatu. So rasa dhatu, one part will contribute to generating the rasa. The second part of that dhatu will go on to contribute to make the second dhatu, which is blood, the second. And the third part will go away as the waste. Ayurveda has details. I'm not going into all this. Not my subject, and I have not done a thorough study. I'm just borrowing what is necessary to explain Brahmacharya. Since the previous one goes on contributing to the production of the next one, this goes on, that's called a vriddhi. So you see that all of them go on having one particular function, and all of them contribute to the gross body of the person. All this goes on to make rasa dhatu, gives satisfaction, that rasa that you get. My favorite term when I first got to know this rasam word, rasam is one of the things we eat. It gives rasam. Anything that gives rasa, the saliva that comes in, and they say a good food is that the minute, even before you've eaten it, when you've seen it and smelled it, the rasa should come out. That means that food is correct for your body because there's a rasa element in it. But if your food does not contribute to that, that means the body will have that much difficulty to digest it. Except there are a lot of intricacies that our rishis and our practitioners, spiritual, have got into great details that even modern science will not understand to that an extent, and modern people will find very difficult to appreciate because their aim and their objective was spiritual growth. So every aspect of life in every school in India was gone into great details to contribute towards the nourishment of the soul, as you would call. Somebody asked me the question, what is a soul? It's a very English term, of course, but towards your own spiritual unfoldment. All 7 of them contribute further towards ojas. Ojas is that which is in your mind, the energy, complete energy, the mental clarity. all of these are giving you the functions of the sense organs. The 7 tissues produce the 7 bright sense organs. This sense organ will further, means all these 7 together go on produce the bright mind, ojas in the mind. These things are not visible to the eyes, but they are functions. So the mind who is bright, and mind bright means your antakaran is bright. Means the indriya, actually, when you go further now in Tattva, you will realize that what you have here as eyes are only external bodies. The real capacity for indriya sukha is actually in your mind. Therefore, the rasa part of it, or I'm sorry, all of them together, if you have a strong tissues, all these seven of functions, these functions contributed to a very good quality mind. In that sense, a functional mind. A mind was strong, a very, how do you put it? The right word would be not dull, not dumb, not disinterested, not so. It's kind of, it went into calm, and it was what you would call as sattvic mind. So the kind of food you ate, everything was seen into one integrated being. So your mind would become sharp. Your mind would be very quiet, calm, correct word, composed, and sharp also. This sharpness of the mind, further, this was the ojas. This ojas brought in tejas in a person. You know what people call as aura around them. Means there's an inner tej. There's an inner brightness. There's a tej in a person. That tej, in English terms, is a magnetic personality, attractive personality, etc., etc. Magar that tej is a production. From all this, all of this is falling into cause and effect. Nothing has come out of nowhere. The whole thing is a cycle of karma, as including what you eat. So the emphasis in our culture was on eating. Eating was a very big part of spiritual, right from eating to getting up to everything. The whole day was a spiritually disciplining day. And the emphasis of pleasures, I'm talking of olden days because that is only context in which you'll understand the importance of these things. In those days where the spiritual growth was the only pursuit in a culture, there the pleasures were minimized only to festival days. Festivals were kept for indulgence because they allowed, there has to be some indulgence, otherwise a human being can go crazy. You need pleasures in life. So pleasures were diminished. But those festivals, you were given the freedom to enjoy, to eat, to do whatever. But even there, they kept it associated with some god or the other, so that you never forget the purpose. 1 day, 7 days, 9 days. They were given every 2-3 months in our culture. The pleasures were allowed, but they were extremely moderated. Unlike in today's time, where even when I say this, it looks like an impossibility if we have to pick up even one spiritual discipline. Because pleasure has become a need today. In our lifestyles, pleasure is a necessity. Pleasure is a recommendation by most people, because if you do not pursue pleasure, then they say you must be suppressed. The idea of becoming a controlled being, controlling your senses, like yesterday's Ratha example, your mind controls your senses. So the whole cycle was taken together. So what they said is the ojas gets most produced when there is brahmacharyam, which means the seventh dhatu is kept controlled. Your shukra dhatu is kept controlled. It contributes to ojas. Now this is where yoga school comes. Remember the differences, please. Do not ever mistake what I'm giving as explanation as a part of Vedanta. This is an explanation to understand the importance of every spiritual discipline. But it did not mean that only this is what is going to give you fullness. These are disciplines. You don't have to take them out of context. You don't have to take them to extremes. And that is why yesterday we saw, I said, Brahmacharyam is a type of tapas. And tapas can be sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. So Brahmacharyam, somebody can do it in a tamasic way, somebody will do it in a rajasic way. Sattvic Brahmacharyam would really mean, as we just said, when you conduct all your sense activities in a moderated way, while your mind and your intellect, you are engaging your mind with higher values, keeping them afloat with higher purpose of life, and letting your intellect dwell on the truth and discovering it and falsifying that which is not true. Even when you are engaged in normal life and activities, you cannot get out of that. It's not needed, it's not possible, and therefore it's not needed also. Both together. Zarurat hi nahi hai. Because while where one is, these disciplines have to be brought in there. So, Brahmacharyam, when it is taken as celibacy, is only taken with an idea that it increases the ojas, but that part is only from the yoga school. It is believed by somebody, and maybe that school people can explain it better. It is not my subject. It is nothing that it is just an explanation. Vedanta and what I'm firm for is once you have come to a quiet mind through any of these practices, all of these practices, doesn't matter whichever practice it is, whatever you've disciplined yourself with, your ear must be sharp, means your mind is sharp to pick up the topic of Vedanta. And that is Atma, Anatma, Vivek alone, and the entire prakriya that Vedanta talks of. Last few minutes, last few points, Brahmacharyam is also taken in one of the 4 ashramas, and it makes more sense there. All of us know the 4 ashramas: Brahmacharyam, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyasa. Brahmacharya means, now you'll understand, appreciate, that learning stage of your life. In our Vedic culture, a human education started. Once there was the ceremony called Upanayanam ceremony. You are sending away your child after the mother has given a lot of love and care to the child. She knows very well that her further love and care can pamper the child. The child was sent away to Gurukul to learn the higher, as we are learning now. Staying with the Guru, staying in a Gurukul. An ashram in itself, Brahmacharya was the vratam that you took on in that stage of your learning. So that means from 7, 8 up to the point of some books say, means some Smriti Granthas would say 16 years, Yajnavalkya would say 12 years for each Veda, means you must take on the Brahmacharya, means all your senses had to be kept disciplined while you're engaged in your stage of learning, which is a student stage. Today, our student life means those first few years, the most crucial years of a human being, are actually dissipated into learning certain things that are just contributory to the artha and the kama pursuits, means pleasures and wealth, money and wealth, or objects and wealth. objects and pleasures. Most of the important stage of the human development means in the Gurukul, the food was correct, the habits were inculcated, all this went on to produce a bright Antakaranam. Means in your growing stage of your human life, if the disciplines were kept as a part of your life, then your everything contributed because it was cause and effect. What Antakaranam you came from your previous births, carried it, you would only improve upon it because you were, etc. But these are all now, I'm talking only in the context of understanding the value of it. There's no denial that they still are the principles, but how in the modern times do you fill them in? So they said that first stage means as long as you're learning, it meant it had a limit. Brahmacharya stage had a limit. Whether it was 15 years, 16 years, or 20 years, or 25 years, it had a limit there. And that was strict disciplines, which means there are books you would find which would give you the disciplines of Brahmacharya. You ate correctly, you ate at the right time, you ate with a prayerful attitude, you slept at the right time, you had a full sleep. While sleeping, you were also sleeping with the last thought of your higher being or prayers or something. You kept your life very simple with minimum clothes, slept on the floor according to them in those days. You were not supposed to get a bed, comfortable bed where you could jump and all those pleasures that we have allowed ourselves now fully. These were the ways in which they allowed the human body to grow without indulging and keeping it to what was necessary for the body and full freedom to have what was necessary. So that by the time the child grew up and entered the Grahastha ashram, once you came out of this, they also had a convocation ceremony. It was a particular kind of a ceremony, a ritual bath. Snataka ritual it's called, which means you were given a sacred bath, means that bath confirmed that now you have become a learned and you're ready to either enter Grahastha ashram, or you had a choice to continue your learning further, which would have entertained you to come into Vedanta. First few years you are not taught Vedanta. It would have brought you into, and for which you would have moved on to Sannyasa ashram. Both these stages would have Brahmacharyam in different ways. So while you were in a Brahmacharya stage itself of your life, the childhood stage of your learning, you had far more stricter disciplines. But when you came to Grahastha ashram, your Brahmacharya would have meant more legitimate pleasures only allowed. Only legitimate pleasures. Only what comes today as the word moral grounds. Only those pleasures which are moralistic would be allowed. And then you came into, if you went on to becoming a full-time student of Vedanta and you took on sannyasa, you are Brahmacharya meant completely, as I've said in Vedanta, all sense pleasures only directed towards knowledge of the self. So you see, Brahmacharya meant an entire canvas and not just celibacy, as it has become popular in today's terms. And therefore, and not that it's wrong, but it has a context. And that context is yoga school, which believes that if your mind, that ojas and that tejas helps in spiritual knowledge, according to them, it helps in spiritual knowledge, gain of spiritual knowledge, probably does. So for those who want to follow. So this is our question on Brahmacharyam. And I conclude this now. Next week onwards, we will continue now with our Tattvabodha, and we will move on to the topic of Shama Adi Shatak Sampatti. So we are still in the process of what are the qualifying disciplines for Brahmagyan. Viveka Vairagya done. Questions coming from there, which came from the portion of Vairagyam, when I took on the words Yama and Niyama for Pratipaksha Bhavana as contributory for Vairagyam. Questions done. There is another side question that has come up, which is when I said yesterday Tapasa chiyate Brahma, and what does that really mean in details? This will require a full explanation, but I think at some other point we'll take that question up separately. Because if I move into that, we will move away from the topic over here. And that topic is one topic. So that comes in Mundaka Upanishad. I'll take it up when we are taking up further, one of the topics we're shifting from. We'll take it up at that time so that it doesn't confuse the rest of you. You have to remember the whole flow of thought as we move on in Tattva. So with this, I will end the class here. Just to the invocation. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्